Welcome to a special edition of the 25th Hour with your hosts, Bianca Forde and Alyse Adamson.
Welcome back to the 25th Hour. I'm Bianca.
And I'm Alyse, and we are your favorite pair of legal besties entering your chat and here to break down the issues of today.
This is where law meets life and everything in between. So Alyse, what's on your mind today, girl?
Man, let's start with what we're watching, okay?
Yes.
And I say this because, I need a break. I am tired. I think we talked about this last episode. I'm just exhausted, not just from my real life, but from all of life, reading all the things. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go and binge another Netflix show. It's been a while since I did that because...
Which one?
Okay. I started watching this show called The Diplomat. Have you heard that before?
I'm familiar. Yes.
Okay, and this is dating myself again, so you know how old I am. I remember Carrie Russell back when she was Felicity.
Yes, Felicity. I don't think I watched it though, but I knew her from there.
It was a great show until she cut her hair. So the whole controversy was second season. She's this beautiful long curly hair. She shaves her head the second season. The show gets canceled. But anyway, I think she was on The Americans.
Can we just put a pin in the fact that is just such, there's so much to unpack there in terms of how society views beauty, how society treats women, how the media and television treat women, but okay, go on.
I was going to say, that is a whole nother episode, and we can talk about that because that cancellation, the show was a little Jumpy the Sharky, but we can talk about that because it wasn't fair. But anyway, so I saw Carrie Russell in this. I'm like, all right, let me give this a shot. And I'm thinking it's going to be a serious show, dark tone. I start watching this. Why do I get sucked in after the first episode, Bianca? This is some scandalous, as in Scandal the show, Shonda Rhimes type stuff. I only meant to just watch an hour that day. It was 2:00 in the morning and I was halfway through the first season. I already finished season 3. I'm done.
Listen, first of all, don't tell me about season 3. So I started watching maybe when they were at season 2. I'm jealous that you have. I've watched, yeah. So I haven't started season 3.
You're holding out.
No, I told you that. I told you I started watching it, and the whole thing had me thinking about taking the Foreign Officer Service exam because I was I'm in the wrong career. This is where I need to be. But anyway, so I did the same thing, and then I realized that season 3 started, and I do this thing where I have to watch the last episode of the prior season to just make sure I'm in and I remember everything. So I started doing that while my son was asleep, and then he woke up. So I haven't been able to start season 3, but yes, I cannot wait to watch season 3. But I gotta tell you, my guilty pleasure for a long time now has been Grey's Anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that I started watching that show when it was 10 years old, when I first started at our former office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. And the cast resonated with me, the camaraderie. And I was sneaking in an episode while my son was napping on Sunday. And I was oh my goodness. This is what we need to remember about the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia right now. And a lot of the offices around the executive branch, right? Just like Gray Sloan, who's been through all sorts of drama and trauma, right?
It's a different kind of trauma, though. They lost me when that helicopter smashed through the ceiling of the hospital. They've had terrorist attacks. They've had all sorts of drama. I mean, we would have to do 16 pods on all of the traumatic shit that has happened in that hospital. It makes no sense. In real life, they would have closed that joint down.
They would have closed it down.
They would have closed it down before you started watching the show. I appreciate your academic take on this. I'm the person in the ambulance saying, take me to the next hospital. I don't see an analogy here. I just want my arm set in this cast. No, but you're. But speaking of our democracy, when you want to get into what's really, I like these distractions because my heart is sad. But do you want to get into what's going on in the world right now?
Yeah, shoot. What's top of mind for you?
Again, I'm living in a ridiculous place right now. We talked about last episode. I have to spend so much time in the weeds and the legal cases that I prefer to be on the peripheral and just look at the fun stuff. So can we start with Diddy, please? Can we start with Diddy?
Sure, let's start with Diddy.
Okay, we all remember our friend Sean Combs is now supposedly going to be doing about 4 years hard prison time, even though bro thought he'd be out did we talk about that he had booked himself in Miami for the week after sentencing thinking he'd get out?
No, I didn't know that.
Yes, prosecutors brought that up in the sentencing. They're Your Honor, he's not taking this seriously. He's already booked events.
Not a good look.
He thought he'd be out. Okay, so now he's doing 4 years. We already said it's probably gonna be 2. But now the reporting says that his team is in in conversations with the Trump administration to commute his sentence, give him a pardon. I don't even know. This was the reporting. Then there was subsequent follow-up reporting saying the White House was denying that they were even considering commuting his sentence. But like the original source was like, we stick by our story. So I don't know what's going on. What's your take on this? I think it's all crazy.
So my take is it's probably true that there was a request made and that the administration was considering it until they polled whomever they polled or did some research, whatever these, staffers do, and realized that if Trump was to commute Diddy's sentence, it would raise all of the speculation back again around the Epstein files. And we can't do anything to get the Epstein files back in the radar. There was actually an article that talked about the fact that it would be catastrophic for Trump supporters because that was part of the place where he was becoming vulnerable, even with his own supporters, in terms of how the Epstein files have been handled. So I think that because of the sexual exploitation nature, right? Even though he was convicted,
he was acquitted. He was acquitted of
that's
all
fine.
Of that stuff.
He was acquitted of those things, right? But I think the connection is too sharp and it's too soon. So it's not going to happen now. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, but all of this Epstein drama is way too fresh. Our government is shut down, so we won't talk about Epstein. Okay, the East Wing is being demolished, so we won't talk about Epstein. Like, listen, anything to get Epstein files off the radar.
They took the bulldozer and drove that No, I don't think that had to do with Epstein. I think that he really wanted his big, beautiful ballroom, and he planned this. And then midway through, they're like, sir, I don't know where you think we're going to put this ballroom. Have you seen the White House grounds? This is not Mar-a-Lago.
Who needs that anyway?
Like, get a bulldozer. Just take it all down. It's terrible. It's ugly. It's going to be the biggest, beautiful. How many people are coming into your ballroom? And right now, you're not making a lot of friends. Like, when was the last time the White House had a ball? But maybe he will. I don't know. Listen, I don't think that was
Maybe they'll have a ball after the event that's supposed to displace the Super Bowl for the right wing. Did you see that? There's an event. I forget what it's called, but it's supposed to compete with the Super Bowl because all the right-wing evangelicals don't want to support the Super Bowl because of Bad Bunny, which brings us to...
Wait, can I just say one thing about that? Football is an American pastime. So all these people who are run off the mouth saying they're not going to support it, guarantee you they're going to be on their phones checking the score because we know football is so intertwined with Americana. Sure. So maybe you're not tuning in for the halftime show, but you show me these men. You want to show me these men not looking at the Super Bowl score?
Right.
I'll believe it when I see it. You can boycott. You can boycott Bad Bunny. I don't think they're boycotting the game. Especially they say this now, but could you imagine if it's their team in the Super Bowl? You're not gonna show up for your team.
Right.
I doubt it.
Let's move to sports. There's some interesting stuff going on in the sports world, right? We have an indictment, something atypical from what we've seen, a whole FBI press conference on these money laundering and wire fraud charges related to throwing games and prop betting.
Yeah, all I've heard, Bianca, is that there was this kind of out of the blue press conference, FBI press conference talking about this huge takedown of what they are framing as kind of a gambling type scheme. Now, you want to talk about distraction. I'm not saying these aren't serious charges because if they're all just allegations, but if proved true, it is serious. We need to be able to trust the integrity of these sports games. And some of the allegations are that there was some insider information going on, especially with respect. Terry Rozier, he's a player for the Miami Heat. Those are some of the allegations against him, that perhaps he threw a game in 2023 betting against his own team. Then, of course, there's Chauncey Billups. He's the Trailblazers coach. He has been arrested for something different, for actual gambling. I think you said it was poker. So different charges, but just the broader scheme would be gambling, right? But I know NBA is a huge headline. That's why they did the presser. We have like the neon lights, big story, big story. But to me, it seemed a little like a distraction because I'm not saying this isn't serious. And the allegations is that people who were legally betting on these games were defrauded because they were throwing them. They were set up. So people did lose money. They're victims. But here's the big but. Why is this what the FBI is spending time doing press conferences, is trying to amp up as a major case, when we know that there are other more consequential cases like
and
the
issues.
Epstein files and issues that we could be having press conferences on, but we're not hearing a lot about it.
We're not talking about
I want to hear your take. I mean, I don't know what to make of these charges. I am still digesting them. Obviously, they are serious allegations, but they're going to need a lot of evidence to prove this, especially against Terry Rozier. My understanding is this has been a years-long investigation. So a splashy headline does not mean guilt. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, one of the examples they listed in the indictment, I think it was, I'm not going to quote which defendant it referred to, but essentially these players, a lot of people get these reports before games, right? Like who is likely to not be playing, who is, going to be playing, who's available, who's injured, etc. And part of the issue was that report was being shared with folks outside of the NBA to like wage bets, right? On which team was likely to be most successful, which players weren't going to show up, who was going to make the most points, what rebounds, etc. All sorts of things. But Stephen A. Smith has an interesting take on why there was a presser, to your point, right?
Uncle Stephen has a lot of interesting takes these days.
He sure does.
Getting his political career. So what does Stephen A. Smith have to say about this?
Even when the scandal came down the pike involving Tim Donaghy, the former referee for the NBA, you didn't see the director of the FBI having a press conference about it. But that's what we saw this morning. And to me, it comes down to this. Trump is coming. He's coming. It's not hyperbolic. It's not hyperbole. I'm dead serious. He's coming for the National Football League. Why you think this whole Bad Bunny thing and the Super Bowl halftime show is an issue? The NBA, and conveniently, this comes down the pike after opening night for the NBA season on ESPN. The veracity and the substance of the case itself, that has to be determined, and that has to bear out. And we have to keep our eyes and ears to the grind about that, to decipher, how significant this is. But there's no question that it's serious.
So yeah, you saw it, right? Like Stephen A. Smith thinks this is the beginning, right? This is a vengeance tour for the administration, in part because of maybe not the NBA as an entity, but definitely NBA players who have come for the administration and been critical of the administration, and including something related to Bad Bunny being featured by the NFL. So Stephen A. Smith's point is this is just the beginning of the vengeance tour that's going to touch on all of these franchises, right? These sports franchises. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here for sure.
Can I give a take? And here's a take. I don't usually make takes like this. Interesting that a lot of these defendants are going to be black, or I call black adjacent, because there are people in the NBA who aren't black, but professional sports tends to be more black, more African-American players. So that's fine for them to do perp walks. They actually got arrested, do big press conferences. And yet some of these other, industries, areas like, cryptocurrency,
getting pardoned
and not investigated, when they are also platforms where there is rampant fraud, and consumers, or whatever you call the people who invest in crypto, I know nothing about it, so I don't even know the right words to use, but I do know that investors, perhaps that's the proper term, are losing a lot of money because of fraud on some of these platforms, and that's not being investigated. Sure. So do you think there is a racial element, or do you think there's not a racial element and it's more of what Stephen A. Smith said? This is just a retribution campaign, and anybody, it don't matter what you look like, Donald Trump and the administration is going to come after you if you are a political enemy.
Sure. I think a lot of things can be true at the same time. There's always a racial element, right? Because in our culture, there is a view that there are certain people that are expendable. So there's always going to be a racial element. I think there could be some truth to what Stephen A. Smith is saying. Again, there's the distraction element of this. You put NBA in a headline and all of a sudden nobody's thinking about the Epstein files. So, I think a lot of things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree. The government tends to like to tout their high profile investigations and victories. And that's bipartisan. I mean, it doesn't matter who's in office. Look at the press releases. I've seen some pretty silly press releases in my time, Bianca, where you're like, this is not the case of the century, but it is because of who either the individual or the entity is. They know it's going to make a splash and perhaps serve as a deterrent for future folks out there who might who might be similarly situated and trying to offend. So that's my take on it, that it's kind of hard to figure out why, like all of the motivations for why, but I definitely think there is a why.
I will say, though, that the investigation did precede the Trump administration, right? Like it started over a year ago at EDNY. So just like we talked about, there was another case we talked about, was it the Bolton case? Right?
Bolton, John Bolton's case was 5-year
in the making.
Administrations. It was both Trump administrations and Biden administrations. And I think you said last week when we were talking about John Bolton's indictment, that's the former NSA, National Security Advisor, who's just been indicted for retaining classified documents. I think you said two things could be true. We had this conversation where, it could be true that
vengeance and there's a real case
and
there.
Also it's a meritorious case. And that's why you should not be signaling any kind of bias towards an investigative target, because then you get to say, well, this is probably vengeance and retribution. You need to be objective with all your cases, because I feel like there is now this this taint on this case, and there's a suspicion as to this case, even though when you read the indictment, there really was a thorough investigation. Now, whether or not he's ultimately going to be found guilty is another question, but there is substance to this case, and it seems like these are meritorious charges, meaning that he should have his day in court, not some nonsense intentionally trumped up charges just to bring down a political enemy.
Yeah. And I think what you just said is so spot on, right? You impact the credibility and legitimacy of the system when you politicize prosecution, right? And because of that, the meritorious cases are always going to be subject to this taint. And I think that's a fair point. It's something that has been discussed when it comes to communities that are over-targeted and over-policed. They start to distrust the system. The same thing happens in this context. So it's a really interesting point to note. I don't remember if we touched on Letitia James last time, but there's been some developments there, right?
So we did touch on Letitia James. She's the New York AG who was recently indicted by the Trump administration for allegations of mortgage fraud, and she is fighting her case. So she's going on with that?
Case. She's going to be arraigned, I believe, today in Virginia, in Norfolk, actually.
At the time of this recording.
At the time of this recording. And, I think a lot has come out since last time we spoke. There was actually a memo either released or shared anonymously with the press that talked about the actual concerns that the prior investigators had about the legitimacy of this case. And part of the reason, we talked about this, I don't remember if it made it into the episode last week, but one of the things it mentioned was how unclear the law is on what occupancy means, right? If you're going to say something is your second home, what does it actually mean? So there's, in addition to the selective prosecution and the vengeance tour aspect of this, there are some real questions about whether or not the government is going to be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes, and she's got phenomenal lawyers. I believe Abby Lowell is representing her. He recently represented Hunter Biden. He is a phenomenal litigator. She is in great hands, and I think we can expect to see him litigating all of this even before a trial date. I mean, ultimately, if she has great defenses, then they'll present that to the jury and jury will agree. But here, there's opportunities to get this case dismissed before it even sees a jury trial, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you just made, your reference to Hunter Biden is really telling, because Hunter Biden was convicted and sentenced under the administration of Joe Biden, right? So to the extent, there is an argument about this weaponization happening both ways. Let's talk about what that signals, right? The fact that a sitting president's son was convicted and sentenced during that sitting president's administration.
That is true, Bianca, but let me give you the counter narrative, because again,
sure,
you know me, I say that's me, middle ground. He was ultimately pardoned. Okay? He was pardoned. He never even went to sentencing. So yes, he was convicted, he was pardoned. Isn't there an argument that even though Joe Biden said out of his mouth, because you know that he was not going to pardon his son. He always planned to pardon him, because you know what Joe Biden also said out of his mouth? That he wasn't going to run for re-election, and then he did. So Joe Biden said a lot of things that ultimately weren't true. And there's this whole narrative about, there's this whole narrative about how Joe Biden was like over dinner, and then he just looked at his son and decided, I'm going to pardon him. After watching The Diplomat, I'm going to pull this full circle, because clearly I just base my opinions on TV. We know that's not true. They had the whole plan. Kerry Russell was up there coming up with the whole plan, and they said, we're going to let him go to trial because he's already been tried in the court of public opinion. Hold
on, are you giving away season 3? Are you giving away season 3?
I'm just talking about what they do behind the scenes. I'm talking about all of the scandal-like manipulations behind the scenes. But he had already been tried in the court of public opinion. All of that's, not all of it, but a lot of the disgusting stuff that came out in trial, and it was despicable. It really was exploiting someone who had a severe drug addiction, which I think was wrong. But we already knew most of this stuff from all of the reporting. His image had already been irreparably damaged. So they let him go through trial to say, look, we're the Biden administration. We let him go to trial. But he didn't face the music, Bianca, because he did it. He was legally guilty. We don't even say alleged with him. Went to a jury trial. And then in the other case, to tax all of the tax evasion, he pled guilty. And you know when I knew? Here's the thing. Oh, I'm on my soapbox. Here's when I knew for sure that Joe Biden was going to pardon his son. When they went to that plea, and he decided to plead straight up to the indictment. He originally, his attorney was like, well, can he get an Alfred? He could do something. Government's like, nah, we're taking this to trial. I said, okay, that's fine. My client will just plead. Nobody pleads straight up like that.
Right,
if they
without believing.
Because the crime he was facing was significant. I was like, nah, bro knows he's going to be pardoned. So I'm hearing you, and I'm sorry, but this is where I'm fair, Bianca. Like, I don't tote any party line. I think all of that was manufactured for the very talking point you just advanced, and I'm calling out everybody. I don't care what party you belong to. That's a talking point. They didn't really try that man. If they really tried that man and they cared about justice, he'd be serving his time like you and me. Because you know what? If I did that nonsense, not that stupid gun case, but if I did all that tax stuff, my butt would be in jail sitting next to Wesley Snipes. Because didn't they put Wesley Snipes' black ass in jail for tax? Right? He had to serve the time.
Look, I think this is worthy of discussion, perhaps a full-blown other episode, right?
I'm sorry, I've been holding it inside so
You've
long.
been holding it inside. You've also been researching it for a while in your, again, multiple CNN appearances on these topics.
I can't keep it that real on CNN. You know what I mean? Like, I need the viewers need to know the legal ramifications.
Sure.
They're not there for my hot take, but you want to know how I feel, viewers? That's how I feel.
I hear that. And I to a degree, I really do agree with you. I do think though, that there is value to letting the system run its course, letting the trial run its course, letting the facts come out. This is complicated by the fact that this was the sitting president's son. I wonder what people would have said if he hadn't pardoned him. But that aside.
I would have said that you know what I would have said if he hadn't pardoned him?
He's a bad dad.
Joe Biden follows through on his words. I believe Joe Biden. I trust Joe Biden. But I'm just telling you right now, the man said he wasn't going to run. He ran again. The man promised us Americans he wasn't going to pardon his son, and he did. Done. I just don't believe you. I
believe that people can change their minds. But let me just say this.
I'm done.
There are a number of Congress people across this country that have multiple houses. Okay, I believe the number might have been 200,000 second homes. That, in the District of Columbia, in part due to the congressional, Congress, whatever, right? Why don't we go look at those mortgage applications?
Bianca,
Why don't we go look at them? Let's go look at them.
So many people, I don't want to say lie on their mortgage applications. So many people take some liberties on the mortgage applications. That's one of the reasons they can't refer everybody criminally, because you know how many people would be referred criminally if they
let's just refer the people we don't like and the people who stand up against us.
That's why but Bianca, that is why even the people are like, I've seen people come in the comments, oh, but they proved that Letitia, okay, you know what though? For selective and vindictive prosecution, it has to be that the government would not have brought, like, first of all, they brought the case against you for the wrong reason, and they would not have brought a case against a similarly situated individual. Here, the dollar amount, right? the dollar amount is so small that I've been looking for other press releases of similarly situated cases where DOJ decided to use their vast resources to prosecute a case of mortgage fraud of this scale, as in one itty bitty house for one family. Sure. And I can't find any. So it's not to say, like, again, these are allegations. She could be completely vindicated, or maybe the allegations are true. But I think regardless, those are not the type of cases that the government brings, because I agree with you. If we went, not just Congress people, the average American with a second home, open up the lending books and let's see what people were saying about their house to get a better interest rate. I think it's just a well-known fact, which bothers me because, again, I'm a prosecutor's prosecutor. I think everyone needs to follow the rules. But it's a well-known fact that there's a little bit of fraud in these things, which isn't good. But they know the government isn't going to be sending criminal referrals.
Good points, Alyse. We're going to have to see how this plays out. But let's end on a high note. Ay,
oh my God.
Ay.
When did you get that? That's hilarious.
So I got this a few weeks ago. I actually, I went to an event actually by Civic Nation. If you haven't heard of them, check them out. They're doing some great things to protect democracy, by the way. But they had an event during CBC at Manifest, which is this Black-owned. Oh, by the way, they have one in Adams Morgan, but this was new to Northeast.
All in DC, all in
DC, new to Northeast, just an amazing space. Like, I go there and work sometimes, but I hadn't tried dinner. There's also a speakeasy. So I told Alyse, I was like, we have to go. So we went with our girlfriends and we had dinner last night and the food was amazing. We had the pork dish with the mashed potatoes. We had the banana fried plantains, the crudo, the Brussels sprout skewers. It was awesome. Y'all need to check it out.
I even finished it off with some dessert. I don't usually do dessert. I try to save my calories, but I had this phenomenal chocolate cake. Oh my gosh, Bianca. I don't even think I let you have a bite. I usually offer you.
You didn't. I was going to ask, but you looked so into it.
None. Yeah. I was so into it. And then I saved a little bit for my husband and he was so happy I brought it home. He's like, is this all for me? I said, yes, because I had the other half. But, I made it look like I gave him the whole
Well, no,
thing.
You were thoughtful. I brought my husband the key lime tiramisu and he absolutely loved it. And me for the gesture. So anyway, y'all should check it out. The place is an entire vibe. And as soon as we get to 10,000 followers, we gonna have an event there. Okay, so help us get there. Okay, so we can support this business.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to go again. It's definitely my new favorite place. So check it out. And of course, keep checking us out. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And we will see you next time in our next 25th hour. Thanks for joining.
Take care.